out of the 3 movies that were announced at Star Wars Celebration 2013, we got an upcoming Rey film, we've got the Origin of the Jedi, but the one that I think is the most hype and the most intriguing is Dave Filoni's first entry into an actual live action film, a full length film, and that's going to be coming out very soon. And the story behind the Dave Filoni Star Wars movies, that's supposed to be a big sort of, I guess you could say, capstone movie to all the Star Wars TV shows. Based on what we've heard, it's supposed to be like a big sort of final battle with the Mandalorian characters, the ones from Ahsoka, the ones from Rebels. Filoni's been kind of working with Lucas way back in the day with Clone Wars and then Rebels, and now he's working with Kennedy and Disney. And so if you've been invested in that universe, if you've been following that, you're going to get rewarded, hopefully, with the Filoni movie. So I want to talk about that today and discuss what I think we might see, what we could see, what we want to see. And joining me today, please welcome back. I mean, him and I used to always do funny little plot pitches. Don't worry, bro. Jiznak the Gusher will not be in this Filoni movie. Real to Real from KRW. What's up?
What's up, Geekdom? I think one of the things that you forgot to mention is probably the most likely of the 3 to actually going to be happening.
Yeah,
I feel like there's no way that this one doesn't happen, but the other 2, kind of a coin toss.
Kathy Kennedy has a habit of like swapping out directors and things like that, but I think Filoni has so much clout that if she gets rid of him, dude, it's gonna reflect really poorly on her, even more so than before.
That's not going to happen. This is definitely something that's going to be built up. I mean, like you were saying, it's a cinematic event that's the culmination of like the last 4, maybe 5 years Filoni, of Star Wars.
Dude, him and Favreau have been carrying this brand. Obviously, Book of Boba Fett, not that great. Obi-Wan had its problems, but The Mandalorian is pretty beloved. I think coming up this week, we're going to have the finale. So before I go any further, okay, we got to get this out of the way. We may be discussing spoilers here, and let me explain what I mean by that. There have been some supposed leaks for the Ahsoka show and for The Mandalorian, so I do not know if these are true. I do not know. I have not double sourced them. So before we go any further, if you're worried about being spoiled, now you know. But again, it's not like it's a definitive spoiler. It's just stuff that we've heard. And the reason why I'm even bringing it up is because these events are supposed to tie right into the Filoni movie. So from what we understand, Mark, we're going to get the Mandalorian Season 3. Season 4, from what I understand, is not even a thing anymore. I think they'll eventually do it, but that's not what's in the plan right now. Then we get Ahsoka, and then we get, of course, the Filoni film. From what I understand, there are 2 endings for Mandalorian Season 3 that they shot. If this is true, again, we're going to go into it. One ending is that Din Djarin dies, and that's going to be the end of the story. That this upcoming episode, he's going to die. Moff Gideon kills him where he sacrifices himself. He's done. I don't think they're going to do that, and I'll explain why. Second ending is going to be that he doesn't die. We think he's going to die, but he's actually going to come back in the Filoni film. I feel like they're not going to kill him because The Mandalorian, despite Season 3 being a step down, is still a very popular character and very beloved. And I feel like if he's ever going to die, it should actually be in the Filoni movie, a hero's death. But what do you think about that so far before we move on to Ahsoka?
Well, I agree with you that if he's going to die, it needs to happen in the movie.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about in our last discussion was I never really thought that Mando Season 4 was ever going to happen. I've always been of the opinion that they're going to continue it, but it's not going to be the Mandalorian focusing on, Mando and Grogu.
It'll be Bo-Katan's show, because at the celebration they were even saying the Mandalorian's not necessarily about him. It could be any Mandalorian, but he is beloved, bro. He is very beloved in the current Star Wars universe.
Well, and that's the thing is like you can't really get rid of him entirely. I mean, one can only look at the merchandising sales and see just how popular him and Grogu are, right? But I do think that, like, if they ever do a Season 4, it's not going to just be the story that we've seen over the last 3 seasons. It's going to be the Mandalorians. It's going to be focusing on that tribe, that mythology, that religion that they have, and exploring that a little bit more, and not so intricately tied to one character. Because the longer the show goes on, kind of makes me feel like that's kind of where they're at, right? Is these characters are like, this world is more interesting to them than the characters in these episodic stories, especially with season 3. The first 2 seasons were quaint, nice. You're seeing like one mission after another, and you don't have to get overly invested. But the 3rd season, I think myself and a lot of people have problems with it because it's too interconnected and there's too much stuff going on, and we have an entire episode where like you're dealing with, you know, the bureaucracy of the Republic, and you're like, okay, this isn't really interesting or fun to watch anymore. So I think it is, if they're going to end it, it's definitely time for them to end it. It'd be really interesting if they end it this season, and you go straight into the Ahsoka television show and then the movie right after that, probably in 2025 at the very earliest.
Or 2026. I think the rumor was 2025 is the Rey film, 2026 is the Filoni film, but that could change because that comes off like what they did before when they were rushing movies to do them once a year. We're going to have the same problems that we had before, and I'm hoping that they are able to actually pull this off correctly. Me and Josh talked about that the other day on that video. So,
well, it also,
go ahead.
I will also say that, like, there's no real reason that Disney needs to push out a movie a year for Star Wars, especially now that they have potentially more Avatar films that they can get done, right? That movie proved that it can make just as much money as it needs to. And then you have, sorry, you can give me this audio later. I'll cut my dog's barking out.
No, it's fine, bro. Go ahead. It's cool. It's not even that easy to hear. Don't even worry about it.
All right, sorry. So for me, it makes a lot more sense that you have every other year you have a Star Wars movie coming out, and then you have an Avatar movie coming out for like the next decade, right? So I honestly, I've heard those rumors. I don't understand the business side of it all, because Disney's proven that Star Wars works better as a December movie, but so do Avatar movies. So
alternate them, as you said.
Yeah.
Well, so the rumor about the Ahsoka show, we're going to get into story stuff now, is that the show's supposed to end. And again, this is just a rumor, but it could be a spoiler. And it's from Making Star Wars, and that guy is right about 95% of the time. So once again, you've been warned. The Ahsoka show is going to end with Grand Admiral Thrawn actually winning and bringing his fleet into the galaxy, and then it's going to go right into the Filoni film, which is going to be sort of the saving of the galaxy. Now, from what I understand, the Ahsoka show and the Filoni film are basically going to be a canonization of elements from the Timothy Zahn novels. We've already seen this with Grand Admiral Thrawn being there. We've already seen, stuff like, Project Necromancer getting mentioned. There's a lot of things they're borrowing from these books. They're retelling them. And I think the strategy here is that they recognize, and I hope I'm right about this, that the way they wrote Luke Skywalker in Episode 8, a lot of fans didn't like it. So they're kind of coming up with this in a way to kind of give Luke Skywalker his moment. So I feel like with deep fake technology and with the new effects they have, which is getting more and more realistic with the film, I really believe it's going to end up being a lot of people's true Episode 7, in the sense of there's going to be a huge battle. Thrawn will be there. He'll be the lead villain because they're building him up already. In the Mandalorian show, he's been mentioned. And even before that in Rebels. Before you watch Ahsoka, you need to watch Rebels, because a lot of these characters are coming back. And there's the whole story with Ezra Bridger, which hasn't been resolved yet. So I think what they're going to do with this movie is we're going to see Luke. We're going to see the Mandalorian. We're going to see Boba. We're going to see, maybe not those two, but I think we're going to see them. Ahsoka. We're going to see Ezra and the crew of the Rebels. We're going to basically see all these characters that we've gotten to know from the TV shows that have not really had much of a chance to shine, plus Luke. And I think this will be the Luke redemption movie. I think the movie that we all thought we were going to get with Last Jedi, with Luke being a badass at the peak of his power, I think that's what we're getting here. And I'm calling it right now. I'm giving you a prediction right now.
Mhm.
I predict, I predict that in the third act of this film, we will see the Millennium Falcon and we will see Han Solo with de-aging technology. I think they're going to give us that Han and Luke moment that we didn't get in the sequel trilogy, where they're going to work together. I think people are going to be coming out of that movie crying, and I'm saying this because Dave Filoni is very, very good at doing fan service and listening to the fans and doing the right kind of fan service. Can you imagine this huge final battle with Thrawn's armies? And you have Luke, possibly the rumor about Mara Jade, if they want to go that route. You've got Han and Chewie and the Millennium Falcon. Even if it's just one scene, I'm here, kid, I'm here to help you. Just that, the movie theater will explode. They will
But,
explode.
based on all of that, I personally think that we have to acknowledge that the one thing the sequel trilogy did not give us. Yeah, I know you were saying like we never got a Luke and Han moment. We never got an original trio moment, which is
Right.
so freaking weird.
And Hamill
because
complained about it himself.
right, it makes absolutely no sense, and they kind of doubled and tripled down on it as the sequel trilogy went on. I don't understand what they were trying to do.
I mean, I think a lot of folks went into those movies upset, and I think this movie, because it's Filoni, dude. Filoni is like the number one Padawan of George Lucas, dude. And I,
Hmm.
I really feel like he's gonna try and give people what they thought they were gonna get in Episode 7. Like that's what this is gonna feel like. No Rey. We might see a young Ben Solo, and I think, and I'm gonna say something now that I may end up regretting, and I'm gonna say something now that I don't know how people are gonna take it, but if they pull this off right correctly, it may
Hmm.
retroactively help the sequel trilogy be more accepted. I think if they actually give the fans Luke Skywalker at his peak, Luke, Han, and Leia. Now, if you're wondering, well, Carrie Fisher's no longer with us. With deepfake technology, bro, yeah, she's no longer with us, but you could even have a scene where she might not even be in the battle. You might just hear her voice, and that might
Hmm.
be enough, I think that would be fine. Like they're in the Millennium Falcon smiling, and then she reaches out to them like with the intercom. There's a lot of things they could do. They
Well,
shouldn't be.
what I'm saying is like, yes, I know that she's passed away and everything, but one thing that's come to light as of recently is that Disney kind of owns the imagery of all their actors and everything. Like, especially with all the work that they did on the Rise of Skywalker, no one's gonna tell. Oh, and also Rogue One because she showed up there too. No one's gonna
Yes,
tell me that like they would not do that if given the option.
right.
And also the blessing from her family, but I can't imagine,
No,
especially with
they'll be fine
Billy
with it.
Lord she was in the sequel trilogy. I can't imagine that it would be so contentious that she would say absolutely not, you can't use my mom's image.
No,
And I don't even think they need the permission any yet. It's just like a respect thing.
right, and I think I just to clarify, I'm not saying that Luke, Han, and Leia are going to be the main characters. I think
Right.
the trio of Luke, Ahsoka, and Ezra being three of the Jedi that are left over, and then maybe even some of Luke's students, because that would pop a lot of people if we see a bunch of Jedi. Like that right there is going to be enough. Like those characters, and they're not even going to have to develop them that much because presumably the live action Ahsoka show and also Rebels will help with that. But I think seeing it just a cameo, even if it's one or two scenes of Han Solo looking like how he did in Return of a Jedi, just a little bit older, played by Harrison Ford, because man, that Indiana Jones trailer where they showed young Indy,
Hmm.
the deep fake tech is getting better and better and better and better to the point where actors are no longer going to be dead, bro. We're going to have Bela Lugosi come back to life any minute now instead of Nicolas Cage to play freaking Dracula. You know what I mean? Like nobody's dead anymore. So I genuinely, truly believe that we're going to get that with this movie. And honestly, bro, if this movie's going to end up being the apology movie, I for one will be happy because it means that Disney's listening. Plus, like I said, I feel weird saying it, but I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that the decisions that were made in Last Jedi were good choices because I don't think they were. But I think it'll be a lot
Right.
easier for
I mean,
fans to.
obviously not.
Right. But I think it'll be a lot easier for fans to accept The Last Jedi if we know that Luke, Han, and Leia did get that reunion after Return of the Jedi, even though it was before Force Awakens. Again, I feel like they should have thought this through more when they first bought the property. But this is their chance to kind of at least redeem it for some. Some will never accept it, and they're gonna see through this. I still feel like this is not a bad move. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. The only thing I have, my biggest issue with the entire concept, going all the way back to what you were saying about the rumors and how this is going to play out going into the movie, is one, Mando season 3 is almost done.
Yep.
Ahsoka's going to be out later, right?
Right.
If they're going to wait until 2026, that's a lot of time in between, especially if there's not going to be season 4 of Mando. And potentially maybe not a season 2 of Ahsoka or however
or Boba
many
Fett.
shows. Yeah, however many shows that they do to kind of build up to it. If Ahsoka's going to be the penultimate point where we're building up and kind of setting the stage for this movie, it's gonna feel like kind of a long wait when they really should strike when the iron's hot.
I think they should put the movie out next year. I think if they're gonna do this, don't wait. Put it out 2024. I really believe that, dude. Or 2025. I really
Yeah,
wouldn't wait.
like,
Hey, if you don't want to do it December, do it in May. Doesn't matter.
no, I agree with that. But so that's one of my biggest issues. And two, this might just be me. A lot of people could be don't even think this way, but I just have a big issue. I understand that this Filoni film is going to be kind of the Avengers level event cinematic film for the Star Wars universe because it's what it's been building to for arguably as far back as the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah.
The thing is like all of that's on television. And the vast majority of the people and characters and everything that are going to show up and be pivotal to this story are living exclusively on Disney Plus, and you can't really access it any other way, right?
Yep.
That's
Well, the goal
this
could
type of
be
stuff.
to get people to watch it too. You know.
I understand that, but this type of stuff is already starting to hurt Marvel in a pretty aggressive way.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The difference is that Marvel's already got 3 movies every year. Star Wars does not. That's the difference.
I don't think that matters one way or yes, in terms of content. It is hard to keep up with how much output Marvel was putting out every single year, especially the last couple of years. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter to the average moviegoer, right? Like, if I don't have Disney Plus, I don't know who. Maybe outside of like a cultural zeitgeist situation, I don't know who Grogu is.
They're gonna have to.
I don't know who Mando is. I don't. Maybe, but like, is the general audience going to catch up?
I don't know,
right?
man. I feel like Mandalorian is so popular that I think it'll work. I really do. I really feel like it'll work.
But we're not just talking about Mandalorian. We're talking about the Book of Boba Fett, which is a far worse show.
Right.
And we don't know how good
Ahsoka
is, but Ahsoka could fall either way, right?
Right.
It could be just as good, or it could be just as
right.
bad as Boba Fett. So my point is like, you're asking people to watch subpar content to get fully caught up for a cinematic event. And it even though it seems like, well, you watch movies, you watch TV shows, and you often do both.
I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing with how they had a movie for Entourage and a movie for Breaking Bad, and then, you know, a movie for, well, they haven't done Game of Thrones movie, but I mean, I'm just saying it seems like something that people are accepting more and more now.
But I think there's a huge difference between in all those things, right? Because those were finales to one singular television show, right?
Oh, I see what you mean. Right.
We're talking about a collective. Because you were even saying earlier, like, well, you better watch Rebels. Well, like, okay, Rebels.
Well, you might want to. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I know, but Rebels is not. It's a Star Wars show for sure, but it's also a kid-centric Star Wars show.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
No argument there.
It's not as adult as The Mandalorian, so you're already starting to lose people's interest there, right? So you run into these situations, and I can't help but think that I understand that this is why this is the cinematic event thing that they've been gearing up for and pushing towards for the longest time. And one of the reasons I think that because of all that and Dave Filoni's involvement and everything is probably one of the reasons this of the 3 films that were announced is probably the one that's definitely going to happen. It just seems like a big ask from general movie fans.
Maybe. They have to bank on the fact that these shows are connecting, and they're not connecting like how they used to, which is why I still think that Din Djarin and Grogu might have to be in it. What kinds of things do you want to see from this movie? What are you expecting, and what do you want to see?
I would definitely want to see Grogu. I feel like that's an absolute must. But like you already said, I would love to see the original three, Han, Luke, and Leia, just in
One
like a
scene.
cameo, like in a cameo. I would, and quite frankly, I want to see Boba Fett, and I want to see them kind of redeem him after the Book of Boba Fett. I could
You
not
mean give him like a
stomach that
moment?
show.
Give him like a moment,
Yeah,
like a moment.
give
Okay.
him a moment. Make him the Boba Fett of the original trilogy.
You're not saying make him a villain though. You're saying have him
No,
help
no,
out.
like make him ruthless. Don't make him so like
Right.
kind and diplomatic and everything.
Diplomatic.
This
Yeah.
is the guy. This is the guy that Vader had to be like, don't vaporize people. Like,
Yeah.
and then the
No
show, he's like,
disintegrations this time is what he said.
yeah, yeah, like don't do that. And like, and then in the show, he just wants to go around and talk to people and everything. It's like, what happened? I don't. They really did his character bad, especially in his introduction in the Mandalorian season 2. He was pretty much right on par with who his character was in the original trilogy. But then, for whatever reason, when he's the focus point of his own show, it just didn't really work out to the point where that show became Mandalorian season 2.5,
Yep.
and I'm
Yeah,
sure it confused a lot of people.
Casuals were definitely confused because when season 3 of Mandalorian started, it was almost like a lot of them didn't even know that Grogu got back with Mando. Like was just not. And yeah, they recapped it, but people were like, "What?" Like some folks just never even bothered to do Book of Boba Fett. Like some never even bothered. And I don't even get me started on Andor. I haven't seen it. I saw the first 2 episodes and I was done with it. And I'm sorry, but I was done with it. It just didn't
So
connect with me.
so that's the type of stuff I personally like. What I would really like to see is I we haven't really discussed this. I feel like these three films are not just different stories. I think they're all three of them are directions. We don't know what to do with Star Wars, so we're putting all this stuff out here. And if something resonates, we will do a sequel to it. We're not going to promise an entire trilogy, but we're going to do a sequel to things that resonate.
Well, the
And I think
idea is to have a plan. That's the idea. And then, well, from what we've heard, that Ray movie doesn't really have a plan yet. So they gotta
But
have
that's
a
my
plan.
point. But that's
man.
my point. You're not greenlighting entire trilogies because you don't have a plan. You're seeing what people resonate with.
I agree. That
Then-
you're basically dipping your toes into the water.
Right. And with Star Wars, it makes a lot of sense. And everything that they're doing right now makes a lot of sense. You're doing essentially a sequel trilogy, or a sequel to the sequel trilogy. Kind of dip your toes in something a little bit more familiar. You're doing something that pays off this big cinematic event that you've been building up on television for the last couple of years, and you're doing something a little more akin to a historical piece, religious focus, Ben-Hur, the Ten Commandments, all this other stuff. Star Wars is a huge universe. You can do a whole lot of things. There's a lot of different directions that you can take it. The Taika Waititi movie, or I can't say his name, but you know what I mean. Like the thing I was reading about his, and I don't know if this is true, is like more akin to like an 80s comedy set in the Star Wars universe. Interesting take. Like, do whatever you want. They're going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And this is, I think, the one thing that they're really hoping sticks, because Mando and Grogu and that entire merchandising arm is incredibly powerful at Disney. And I know it's something that they want to push out as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah, man. Now, before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you this. It's tricky because what do you like? You can't give this movie an episode number. So what do you call it? Like Heir to the Empire? Like what? We don't even. What do you call it? Also, have you heard about what my post credit scene idea was?
No, I'm curious now, but
Yeah.
I like the Heir to the Empire, although I know that's a book title.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They would just take it from the book because it's kind of doing the same idea. You know what I mean?
That's what Marvel does. They take titles from comic books and then they just completely rework the story
That's
to their benefit, right?
exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, there's a lot of things they can do, but my idea for a post-credit scene. Now, I'm not saying I want this. I'm saying that they could do this. Also, so the three books, right, are Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. I feel like Dark Force Rising might actually be what they call this, and I'll tell you why. So, the way I can see this playing out is Thrawn loses, the Republic wins, he retreats to Exegol, he goes to meet up with Palpatine, who's, remember, his whole thing is that he's stuck in that body that's all messed
Mm-hmm.
up, and he's there and he's like, I'm sorry that I failed you. I need some of these ships that you have here, the ones that were used in the Rise of Skywalker. And then
Mm-hmm.
Snoke from behind stabs and murders Thrawn, and then he takes over. I have a feeling they're
Okay.
going to do it just like that. Now, I'm not saying that's what I want. I think they're going to do it that way. That way, we basically what we've done with this movie is created the First Order and put into motion the events of the sequel trilogy. I feel like that is something I could totally see happening. And also, this movie is an interquel. It's a prequel to Force Awakens, but a sequel to Return of the Jedi. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think about that?
Are you? I really like the idea, but I also feel like, man, I know there's been a subsection of the Star Wars fandom that's been clamoring for Snoke in some way, shape, or form. I mean,
Well, they
the
want
amount of
more
people who were
Snoke.
like talking he was going to show up in Mando, uh, the Mandalorian season 3. It's I don't know. And I feel like the way that he's handled, though, the way they kind of threw his character to the wind in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, can his character be salvaged? Like, he's a cool looking character, obviously, but what would be the benefit of exploring him? What did he do?
That's been a criticism of them for a while. It's just that I think what it is when they showed him in Force Awakens in the first half of Last Jedi, Andy Serkis played him so well. Like, that is one thing I will say about Last Jedi is I really enjoy all the scenes with Snoke. And it's because
Sure.
Serkis is so great, man. He's so great at doing that motion capture. His voice, he's great at playing that, light Diet Coke version of the Emperor, you're just a boy in a mosque. Like, I was enjoying all of his scenes in Last Jedi before he got killed. So I would love to see more of him, but I just feel like they're going to hold off on it until the post-credits scene. I don't think he's going to be the villain of the movie. I think that, even though I wouldn't mind seeing a story where he shows up and that's how Leia and Han even know about him, but I still feel like that's going to be something that they hide. The comics have already shown us a lot of that stuff too.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't really like the idea of what they've done with the comics and having Snoke like Kylo Ren wasn't even a member of the original Knights of Ren. There's a lot of weird choices they made in the comics that most like Star Wars fans have no idea about. I kind of wish they would read over that, but I doubt they will because it's current Lucasfilm. The only issue I have with it is that you have people out there who absolutely despise the sequel trilogy, who feel like the sequel trilogy ruined Star Wars, and in many ways I can understand it did, but anything about the sequel trilogy, whether it be the Snoke, the Rey, anything from that sequel trilogy, seeing it, or even the Praetorian Guards we saw in the last Mando episode, like, that's gonna piss people off because in their mind they kind of want to move on from it and forget about it. But I don't know, when they show sequel trilogy visuals, it's gonna piss off some people, man.
Well,
But
here's what I would say.
What can you do about that?
Here's what I would say for, after not focusing too much on Thrawn and Snoke and all that stuff. First and foremost, like, isn't Thrawn, like, not a huge buff about the extended lore, but he is one of the most revered villains in the entire canon, right?
Because of the Timothy Zahn books, and then they brought him into Rebels.
Right. So like he is a popular character, and it
Right.
would be if he's done right. I believe Mads Mikkelsen's brother is playing him, which I believe he did the voice in Rebels as well. I can't remember.
Lars Mikkelsen, right?
Lars Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like if he's good and Mikkelsen, like they're both pretty good actors, so I'm assuming he's going to be a good villain. Like I would feel bad having him only in one movie, so I wouldn't kill him off with Snoke. What I would do
Really? You'd hold
instead,
off on him? Okay.
I would use him for the sequel. Maybe have him be the big bad, like kind of the
Wait, so you're saying do a sequel to the Filoni movie? So
yeah. Of course they're going to do a
okay.
sequel to, if it's big. But here's what I would do for a
Okay.
stinger.
I
Here's
thought
what I do for
I
a
thought
stinger.
this is supposed to be the end of the whole Mando thing, like the end of the current TV.
I can't see that being the I
No, you
can't.
might be
There's
right.
too much.
Yeah.
There's too much story. But I
Right.
think connective tissue. If you're going to connect to the sequel trilogy in one way, it's not introducing Snoke in a big climactic way like that. What you do, I think, is you after credits stinger. Luke, after all the fighting and everything, he goes back to his Padawans. You meet that young Ben Solo,
Right.
and he's like going down to sleep or something after talking to Luke and everything. And in his mind, you start to hear Snoke.
Man, that's gonna piss off some people because it's gonna bring it back to Last Jedi again. I'm just saying,
but you know what I mean. Like that connects it, but it doesn't. Like it, the seeds are there. You're connecting it to everything that came before, but it's not like promising a direct sequel to this, right? It's just
yeah, it's a teaser for really the sequel trilogy. I mean, really.
right. But like it's just that, and it doesn't promise that Snoke's going to be a big bad in the future or anything, or we're going to explore him. Because my point is like the guy is so. Like at least in the movies, I'm not talking about the comics and the books and all this other stuff that they've done to explore his character in the future, or sometime in the past, but in the future. He's kind of a nothing burger of a character. As good as Andy Serkis is playing him, like the movies didn't do him justice.
No,
and
I
the vast
agree.
majority
I
of
agree
people
with you.
who are
They
going
didn't.
to see this movie are people who didn't read the comics, they didn't read the books, they didn't do any of that stuff.
I would assume you're right. Yeah.
So yeah, like I treat it like oh, it's a stinger that connects to the sequel trilogy, so it's there, but you leave the big bad alone so he can come back later, right? Just in case the movie does really well, and you need that Emperor type of character to kind of be the through line.
Well, there's also
for
that story they're building up with Moff Gideon because they're kind of building up sort of like an Imperial Civil War in a way because Moff Gideon doesn't want to wait for Thrawn. We saw that kind of implicated in the Mandalorian last episode. So we could always see a situation where Moff Gideon wants to control the Empire and him and Thrawn have a conflict. I feel like they're building up some kind of conflict, like a fight for power. You know what I mean? And maybe what could happen is Gideon and Thrawn destroy each other, like their militaries, and that's when Snoke takes control. There's a lot of things they could do with that, and I actually like the idea of like different people fighting for power of the remaining of the Imperial remnant. I kind of like that idea. It's funny though because when I saw that scene of like all the Shadow Council, it reminded me so much of the scene with Jonathan Majors and all the different Kangs. It was like very similar. You know what I mean?
Well, like this is actually a really interesting idea for the entire movie, right? So we're talking about like, is this a one-off or is it the start of a trilogy? They don't really know yet. Whatever. But like, it would be interesting to have an entire trilogy about the rise and fall of the Empire, like to the new order, right? Like the First Order or whatever they're called in the
First Order. Yeah, it's almost the new empire that rose from the remaining of the
right. But
the
like what you're saying, like with your teaser scene, instead of it being a teaser scene where you're just kind of setting up and like, this is how we get from point A to point B, entire trilogy.
You
like,
you cut out there. Because your
so
audio was bad. You said point A to point B, and then what?
So you have instead of having a point A to point B where you see a stinger, and that's supposed to give you some inclination as to how you got here, right? Like you started with the Mando movie if you're watching it in chronological order, and then you got to the First Order in Episode 7. That's what you were saying earlier. But
Yes.
what if you had? What if you take it a step further, like you were just saying, and you have an entire trilogy? But you have like heroic characters like Luke and Han, Leia, Mando, Grogu, all these other things, but they're kind of side characters to the overall story that's really about the infighting in the Empire
Right.
that eventually gets to where it is in Episode 7. I
Yeah.
think that would be fascinating.
I agree. No, and then if you do that, you could make more movies because then you could build it up like a slow thing. You know,
Yeah.
like little by little. They've already laid the seeds down, and really, in many ways, let's keep it real, dude. They are kind of borrowing from Marvel because Star Wars always had like the EU going all the way back to Splinter of the Mind's Eye, but it was mostly books. And then Marvel comes along, which is doing something different. They're adapting the books into movies, but making each movie kind of its own story. And then you have crossover events, which is what comics did first. And Star Wars is doing now with this very similar, because even though you can sit there and say, well, Rogue One and Solo are kind of like, expanded stories or prequel, sequel stuff, what they're doing with this, which is what Marvel did, is it's going to be the ultimate payoff and the reward for watching all of the Filoni shows. That's what I think they're going with this. So it would be infinitely more interesting if Gideon and Thrawn did have a conflict, and then Snoke rose from that. There's a lot of ways they can go with it. Is that what you want to see, or is that what you think they're going to do?
I think that's what I would want to see, honestly. I think that would be because Star Wars is so black and white. It would be really interesting to see lots of shades of gray, where like the people that we're focusing on, the story that we're focusing on is primarily the Empire. The people who are supposed to be the bad guys, right? And like there's this internal struggle between them, and we're rooting for one side or the other, even though we know where it's going to turn out. Like if you do that well, I think that could be compelling.
Yeah, I agree with that. So before we close out, any final thoughts on this film? Anything you're looking forward to? Go ahead. Anything. Floor is yours.
I can't even, I just have to say I can't imagine that Grogu's not going to be in this movie, and I can't imagine that Grogu's not going to be in the Rey movie. So he's so popular. And there's a chance that, if you're going to explore the Jedi in the distant past, the first Jedi to ever wield the Force or something, like you do something with Yoda's race, maybe that's a through line with these three movies, and it kind of creates a small little Grogu trilogy. That would be my guess.
You're saying that the person of Yoda's race,
Yoda's race,
but it's a different person just from way back.
Yeah.
And then
depending on how way back.
Are you saying that Grogu? Are you saying that in your opinion Grogu should be related to Yoda, like a nephew or?
No,
I
son? I don't know. I have no idea what Grogu is to Yoda. I don't even care if it's just like they're the same race. They just, for whatever reason, this race is. There's not a whole lot of them, but they're very in tune with the Force. Like that's fine by me. And we don't know how far back this is going to go.
Gotta be before the Old Republic, right? You would assume it has to be.
Yeah,
this could be like the first story, like chronologically. I mean.
Yeah, but like we also know that Yoda lived to be 900 years old,
over 900.
So like his species lives for an incredibly long time, right. And his. They say that Yoda was like a Jedi Master before he hit 100. So by the time the Rey movie comes out, like Grogu's probably going to be like in his 90s. So he could probably be a Jedi Master. So there's like, my point is like if there's going to be a through line with all three of these films, like it could be in the Yoda race. And the fact that Grogu is just so popular merchandise wise, I have a hard time believing Disney would pass that up.
He's a merchandise monster. He is.
He is.
He sold a hell of a lot more merch than freaking. What the hell's the name of that? Rose Tico, bro. He's hell of a lot more merch, yo. Anyways, we're gonna close the video. Let us know your thoughts down below, what you think about all this and the Filoni film. We'll talk soon. Take care, and of course, check out KRW Network. Bye.